Oh my God, help her!
Let's see if she can swim like the other people from her tribe. That was the moment every guest went silent. The harsh laughter of a billionaire rang across the sparkling pool. Champagne glasses hung in the air, and every phone aimed toward the scene like a weapon. This is Hidden Worth, and tonight you're going to hear one of the most horrific black stories ever recounted. It's a narrative that shows that even in the deepest depths, the truth may still come to light. Aaliyah Brooks, a young black waitress with a sunny smile and a gentle grace that made cruelty look even worse, was at the center of it all. She wasn't really loud. She didn't want to fight. But tonight, in that mansion in Palm Beach, Florida, where billionaires and politicians lived, the guy who owned everything was offended by her entire existence, her skin, her silence, and her dignity. Gregory Hale was a self-made CEO whose chemical empire stretched across the state. He bragged that he could buy oceans and bottle storms. The guests laughed at his jokes, admired his power, and whispered rumors about how he had built an indoor aquarium filled with live piranhas from the Amazon for conversation. His best work was the pool, water that is crystal clear, walls made of reinforced glass. He said it was a living symbol of control. When Aaliyah accidentally spilled red wine on his $1,000 linen suit, Gregory saw a chance to humiliate her, not to punish her. "Be careful, sweetheart," he yelled loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You might stain the pool if you fall in." The laughter that came next wasn't just mean, it spread quickly. And as Gregory pushed her shoulder with his palm, sending her back into the sparkling pool, the sound of her body hitting the water was like a gunshot in the night. Bubbles, screams, recording on phones. The same people who had clapped for Gregory a few minutes before now saw the water swirl around Aaliyah and saw her disappear into the depths filled with silver fangs and red light. But what they didn't know, and what no one expected, was that Aaliyah Brooks had studied predators long before this night. And she wasn't going to be anyone's prey. If you're ready, click subscribe. What happens next will make you doubt everything you thought you understood about power. Aaliyah Brooks didn't grow up with money, but she did grow up with something far stronger: curiosity. As a tiny kid, she went to Cocoa Beach with her mom and asked questions that no one else appeared to care about. Why did some fish stay hidden in the sand while others swam into danger? What was it about the water near the factory that made it smell different? Aaliyah obtained a full-ride scholarship to the University of Miami by the time she turned 18. She was going to study marine biology. Professors described her as the kind of student who was sharp, quiet, and always 3 steps ahead. She loved the ocean more than anything else. She wanted to keep it safe. She wanted to know what it meant. Her final thesis was already getting attention from environmental NGOs. It was a deep dive study of the patterns of chemical runoff from Florida's industrial companies, including Hale Industries. After that, nothing happened. Her mother, the only person who had always believed in her, was told she had stage 4 liver cancer. Doctors stated it was aggressive. Aaliyah knew, even though they didn't say it out loud. Their community was downstream from a place that cleaned up trash. She quit school to work as a full-time caregiver. The world stopped making sense when her mother died 6 months later. No more studying, not any more future. Just bills, sadness, and a strong feeling that someone had to pay for what happened. She didn't think twice when she noticed an ad for seasonal workers at Star Lake Estate, Gregory Hale's private resort. Most people would think of it as work. Aaliyah thought it was an entrance. She learned the layout, the rules for employees, and even how to set up the estate's aquarium system. She watched everything at every break and shift, from security routines to guest behavior to where the maintenance personnel kept the override keys for the filtration system. She didn't smile for very long, never talked unless someone else did. She made herself inconspicuous on purpose. Because underneath the uniform and the trained silence was a mind that was good at finding patterns, and a heart that remembered everything. She realized that Gregory Hale wasn't only wealthy, he was dangerous. She knew his empire wasn't clean, and she thought his piranha pool was more than just a rich man's trick. But most importantly, she knew how piranhas acted. She knew that they only attacked when they were angry. She knew how to make people scared and how to stop it. She had learned from predators, Aaliyah Brooks, and she was ready for it. Starlake Estate looked like the cover of a high-end lifestyle magazine from far away. The estate, which was located on a secluded peninsula just outside of Palm Beach, has about 20,000 square feet of marble, glass, and exquisite landscaping. Like good soldiers, the palm trees swung in straight rows. Spotlights lit up every corner of the estate, as if it had something to prove. This was more than a house. It was a stronghold made of cash. Guests came in blacked-out SUVs and old convertibles, and they were led past iron gates and guards in uniforms with earpieces. They all had that kind of confidence that comes from knowing the rules didn't apply to them. Politicians, CEOs, Twitter is still full of celebrities that have been in scandals. Aaliyah Brooks waited at the service entrance in a crisp white uniform and simple black shoes and watched them. She had worked at a lot of fancy events previously, but nothing like this one. The fragrance of cedar and sanitizer was everywhere in the hallways. There was a camera hidden in the corner of each room. The crew was taught how to be invisible. They had to walk silently, only talk when spoken to, and never stare a guest in the eye for more than 3 seconds. Aaliyah did what she was told. She remembered people's faces, how to get somewhere, and when things were due. The estate's most valuable asset wasn't the wine cellar or the gold-plated cigar lounge. The pool was a glass-walled aquarium that ran down the whole west side of the home. At first, it looked like a stylish piece of design. But if you got closer, you could see movement. Silver flashes just below the surface. Piranhas, for real. People didn't want to ask about it because it was brought in illegally. He termed it his liquid throne. He liked to tell his guests that watching the piranhas helped him clear his head. Some people laughed uneasily. Some people nodded, as if it made perfect sense. The theme of the party that night was a feast of power, which was a strange mix of Roman excess and Silicon Valley hubris. People wore white to show that they were pure. Gold-dusted oysters and venison with truffles were on the menu. Aaliyah moved like a shadow the whole time, smiling just enough to be loved and not talking enough to be noticed. But there was a plan behind that smile. She had counted all of the cameras. She was aware of which exits had broken locks. And most crucially, she had spent hours researching the pool's filtration system and memorizing the emergency shutoff code that was written down on a sticky note in the maintenance closet. Gregory Hale didn't know it yet, but the occasion tonight wouldn't finish with a toast. It would conclude with a scream, and Aaliyah Brooks would no longer be the shy girl in the back. She would be the one in charge of the current. It began with a splash, not from the water, but from a crystal flute of Dom Perignon that spilled over a woman's silk dress. The woman, who was inebriated and unsteady in heels that were too high for comfort, had bumped into Aaliyah as she walked by with a tray of drinks. The glass tipped. The woman's shoulder was covered in liquid gold, which seemed like a rude comment. Aaliyah quickly said she was sorry and looked down like she had been taught to. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. Let me help you." But before she could get a napkin, a deeper voice cut through the music. Gregory Hale exclaimed, loud enough for everyone on the patio to hear. Of course she spilled it. People stopped talking. People looked. Gregory stood by the fire pit, his arm over the back of a leather chaise. He stared at Aaliyah like a predator watching her move. "They can't even serve a drink right," he said, his voice full of contempt. "She might be better off cleaning tanks." There was polite laughing after that, but it wasn't funny. It was just dread and imitation. Aaliyah's jaw tightened, and the tray shook a little in her hands. But she didn't say anything. She nodded, said she was sorry again, and then turned away. Her fingers slipped into the pocket of her apron as she headed back to the bar. She hit record on the voice memo app on her phone. She had been hoping for something like this, something that isn't filtered, something mean. She had it now. She took 5 seconds to breathe in the staff area. Then she pulled out a small GoPro that she had hidden under a stack of clean napkins. She had bought it used for $70. She put it in the neckline of her uniform, changed the angle, and tapped it on. It was time. She moved through the east corridor, past the kitchen, and into the service hatch that led to the maintenance tunnel. There was a closed cabinet at the end that said, "Pump control authorized personnel only." She didn't have permission. But 2 weeks ago, she saw one of the groundskeepers type in the code 0966. An unplanned gesture, a missing fingerprint. It only took that. The door to the cupboard clicked open. There was a red button next to a touchscreen inside. Current flow override use with caution. She didn't push it, not yet. But she looked at it and remembered its pulse. She shut the cupboard, moved her tray, and went back to the party. Gregory Hale had done something wrong, not because he hurt her feelings, but he thought she wouldn't fight back. And the moment that would change everything for him, the real trigger hadn't happened yet. But it was on its way. He didn't push her because he was angry. He did it to get others to clap. When Aaliyah struck the water, the most frightening thing for her was that Gregory Hale's eyes weren't angry, they were amused. The time slowed down. The clear water broke apart as she swam through it, and the lights from the patio broke into ribbons above her. As she dove, her white shirt ballooned, and the noises of the party, the gasps, the scattered laughter, and the clinking of glasses became muffled echoes under the water's veil. But stillness had its own rhythm deep below. She blinked. The chlorine didn't hurt much. She became more focused. Piranhas swarmed around her like shadows, their scales catching flashes of light as they moved in strange ways. Not swarming yet, but getting close. There was blood in the water, and Gregory had turned it over. She felt a searing pain in her forearm, which could have been from a scratch from the fall or from the edge of a tile. It wasn't too deep, but it was enough. A red trail spiraled up like smoke, making lines in the pool. The piranhas saw. Their movements changed. They made tighter loops and darted faster. Gregory lifted a champagne glass above the water. "Let's see how long she lasts," he remarked, his voice echoing across the estate. Some attendees were shocked. Others picked up their phones. Aaliyah didn't thrash around. She didn't yell. Instead, she stopped moving her body totally. Arms out to the sides, breathing steady, and eyes open. She remembered the lecture in her junior year, when Professor Cooper's voice echoed through the auditorium. Panic makes piranhas go crazy, a sudden move, vibrations that cause distress. If you stay still, you're just another thing. Move quickly, and you become prey. She felt like her lungs were on fire, but she didn't move. The lights above sparkled. Camera phones took pictures from every angle. But no one came to help, because no one thought she would live. Aaliyah slowly and carefully moved toward the left wall of the pool, which is the side closest to the filter grates. There was a weak current in the water that pulled softly in that direction. She let it take her, but not too much. Every move is planned. Every breath is planned. She wasn't in the water. She was getting into position. Because this wasn't about getting away. Not yet. This was about having power. About changing the place where she was humiliated into the place where he would die. Gregory Hale felt this would be the end for her. But that was just the first scene. Gregory Hale stood erect at the surface, taking in the attention like it was his birthright. He didn't see how the crowd changed the apprehensive looks and the way laughter started to die in people's throats. He simply saw the girl in the water and thought the narrative was still his. But Aaliyah Brooks was carrying out a strategy that he couldn't have anticipated under that shiny surface. She got to the side panel of the pool, which she had looked at while cleaning it the week before. A square grate that is only big enough for a hand. A jet current pushed water out into the filtering system behind it. Aaliyah pressed her body close, and the current pulled at her clothes. She counted to 3, and then pulled a hairpin out of her belt that she had twisted into a tool. With one smooth move, she slipped it between the screws, popped the latch, and opened a small black box that was the auxiliary intake port. Gregory still thought this was his time. "She's not moving," he joked. "Maybe she finally knows where she belongs." A few individuals laughed. Some people moved around uneasily. Then there was a faint but clear mechanical hum coming from below the surface. Aaliyah had started the override sequence. The current in the pool changed. A reversal surge that starts off little and then gets stronger. Like a storm rising from below, bubbles spiraled toward the center. Piranhas darted around madly because they were confused by the unexpected change. The pressure and confusion made their instincts to eat stronger. Gregory felt it then. The tiles under his feet shook a little. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but it was enough to make him lose his balance. He took a step back. Too much. The moist concrete made his Italian loafer's heel slip. He struggled to get back up, waving his arms around to keep his balance. But it was too late. Gregory Hale, The man who pushed a young woman into a tank full of dangerous animals fell headfirst into his own glass trophy. The splash was huge. Water shot up into the air. Phones rose like a jungle of eyes. Gasp. Screams. One of the champagne flutes broke on the patio. And Aaliyah, who was still underwater, turned slowly. She couldn't take her eyes off of him through a sheet of bubbles. He hit the ground hard. He yelled. But now his blood was in the river. His terror was now reverberating through the pool. He had prodded the beast, and suddenly the beast had teeth. Gregory Hale was not in charge for the first time in years. He had turned into the spectacle, and the people in the crowd were in the front row. Gregory Hale fell into the water forcefully, and the collision knocked the wind out of him. For a time, everything stopped. The lights above flickered on the surface of the water, and his arms and legs moved like a puppet that had been torn loose from its strings. Then the blood came. When it hit him, the jagged edge of his Rolex cut across his wrist. It was only a scratch, but it was enough. The water moved again, and the reverse current was now rushing through the pool. Dozens of piranhas swam in circles, their smooth bodies bouncing between instinct and uncertainty. Gregory kicked hard to get to the surface, but the current pushed him sideways and confused him. His fancy outfit was too big for him and made him seem silly. The crowd gasped above the water. People dropped their phones. A woman yelled. But no one stepped in. Because the man who had made cruelty into a show was now in the show. And Aaliyah Brooks, still underwater and peaceful, turned to face him like a wave with a purpose. Under the surface, their gaze met. His eyes were wide with fear. Hers was steady and unwavering. She didn't move quickly. She didn't have to. The pool was doing the work for her. The red light from the lights under the sea made it look like the water was bleeding. The piranhas moved rapidly around the tank, lured to the pandemonium and the smell of weakness. Gregory tried to yell underwater, and bubbles came out of his mouth. He swam to the surface, but his hands were clawing at nothing. Someone on the side of the pool yelled, "Get him out!" But nothing happened. Only cameras. Because no one wanted to touch him now. The crowd that used to love Gregory Hale was now frozen, kept hostage by the drama they used to love. And Aaliyah softly came up next to him. Her head broke through, and her eyes were fixed on the front. Gregory choked and said, "Help me, please." Aaliyah didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The moment said it all. She was the one who had been pushed into a tank as a prank. Now she was standing next to the man who made her the punchline. And for the first time, everyone could see her. Not as the server, not as a background, as the middle, as the one who knew the truth and the current. She didn't need to get back at him. She had something stronger. Evidence. Because her body camera, which was hidden under her uniform, was still on. Every harsh thing, every laugh, every yell. This was no longer just about justice. This was the turn. And the world was about to find out who Gregory Hale truly was. He was not the man with the glass of champagne anymore. Gregory Hale was now hanging on to the edge of his own piranha pool, bleeding, shaking, and with eyes wide open in the kind of panic that makes a person seem very small. The pride was gone. The showman was gone. There was only a man on the verge of panic, surrounded by glass, water, and something much more terrible. Be quiet. The music has ceased playing. The talking stopped. Dozens of people stood still behind their camera phones, capturing every second but not doing anything. This was not a rescue. This was a wake-up call. "Please," Gregory moaned, his voice hoarse and his teeth trembling. "Please, get me out." The moist edge of the pool made his hand slip. There was blood all over the glass. The gash on his wrist wasn't too bad, but the terror made it bleed more, and the piranhas could smell it. They swam in tight circles now, and there was a silent storm of scales just below the surface. One touched his leg. He kicked hard, sending water flying everywhere, and screamed, "Help me, please, please." Then Aaliyah came back. Water rolled down her face like rain off glass as she got out of the pool from the other side. Her hair fell across her cheeks. Her uniform stuck to her flesh. She swam carefully toward him, not out of pity but with a plan. Gregory noticed her and yelled, "Aaliyah, I'm sorry, please. I was intoxicated. It was a joke. Please." She stopped 2 feet away, near enough to look him in the eye. He was shaking and barely able to hang on to the side of the pool. And she was still. She turned her head and spoke in a low, steady voice. "You pushed me into this like I was a thing," she remarked. "Like I didn't matter." Gregory cried, "You do matter, I swear." "No," she said. "You swear because you're scared." He opened his mouth. There were no words. The lights in the pool behind them flickered again. One piranha came to the surface for a second, then disappeared in a flash. Gregory went down lower, with his chin just above the waterline. He couldn't breathe. "I'll do anything. I'll give you money. I'll fix it." But Aaliyah only looked. She didn't smile. She didn't make a threat. She just said softly, "This was never about money. It was about the truth." Then she swam past him, not toward the exit, but to the far side, where she discreetly pulled herself out. Gregory Hale stayed in the water, his hands slipping and his panic growing. And the man who used to be in charge of the room suddenly begged like a kid in front of everyone. The internet had already made up its mind by dawn. The scandal at Starlake Estate was no longer a secret. It was a global awakening, a live look at pride, cruelty, and poetic justice. Before the sun came up, the first video went viral. It got 2 million views in 4 hours after being posted on TikTok with the title, "Black Waitress Pushed into Piranha Pool by Billionaire." Then this happened. By lunchtime, number Justice for Aaliyah was the most popular hashtag in 12 countries. Many fuzzy and clear clips from different viewpoints filled social media. The push, the splash, the scream, the pleading. People weren't just looking. They were doing something. Sewing. Looking at. Angry. Everyone could see every second of Gregory Hale's fall from grace. CNN, the BBC, and even late-night hosts all had something to say. Memes propagate quickly. One featured a still picture of Gregory holding on to the wall of the pool with the words, "When you pay for chemical waste but can't deal with clean water." But this wasn't simply a backlash on the internet. The environmental groups that had ignored Aaliyah's communications before now opened their files again. Within hours of the event, her audio and body cam recordings had been sent anonymously to several watchdog groups. There was more than simply the pool footage in them. They showed that Gregory and his close friends talked about dumping trash, changing permits, and paying off inspectors to keep them quiet. One tape even showed Gregory chuckling and stating, "We'll just buy more fish if they die." There was an immediate response. The stock of Hale Industries fell 38% in one night. Their public relations staff made a vague, empty statement. But no one believed it. Within 48 hours, the Securities and Exchange Commission started a formal investigation. The Environmental Protection Agency did too. And the Florida Attorney General's office. At first, Aaliyah's identity was safe, but not for long. When it was ultimately exposed, she was no longer merely a waitress. She spoke up against something wrong. Someone who lived. A hero. Along with the films, pictures of her from college started to spread. In one, she is smiling in a lab coat and clutching a coral reef sample. People wanted to know why her voice had been ignored in the first place, why no one had paid attention to her research. And the answer was very apparent. Because she appeared like someone they thought would be quiet. But suddenly, her quiet was the loudest sound in the whole land. The man who shoved her into the river had no idea. He had simply helped bring the truth to the surface. And what about the world? Everyone in the world was watching. Starlake Estate turned into a murder scene instead of a mansion in the days that followed. Federal agents showed up in black SUVs with sealed search warrants. Drones flew around the outside. What used to be a private playground for billionaires was now a monument to power that had gone too far. Gregory Hale, who used to be the untouchable CEO of Hale Industries, was now in a hospital bed with a broken shoulder, dozens of stitches, and one fewer job. His visage, which used to be on the covers of IT and business magazines, was now on news thumbnails with terms like scandal, corruption, and criminal negligence. And the clips. The videos Aaliyah had taken with her phone, her uniform, and her hidden GoPro were now important pieces of evidence in an inquiry that was getting bigger. Gregory admits to making up water testing reports on camera. audio of him making fun of towns that are afflicted by chemical runoff. He even talked to his lawyers about burying scientific research that pointed the finger at the corporation. One statement stood out the most. "If we get caught, we'll just pay up. Everyone has a price." But not this time. People were watching. This time, they were very loud. There were a lot of petitions on several platforms calling for a complete audit of Hale Industries. Environmentalists set up camp outside the company's headquarters in Tampa and sang Aaliyah's name. Agencies that protect whistleblowers became involved. Members of Congress asked for hearings. It was no longer simply about Gregory. It was about a system that helped men like him get away with things for decades, until a lady they ignored switched on a light they couldn't turn off. The whole board of Hale Industries got a subpoena. 3 execs quit in less than a week. By the end of the month, 2 were charged. The company's main water treatment plant was closed. Fines in the millions kept coming in. Families whose kids became sick, fishermen whose businesses were ruined, and communities whose drinking water was polluted all sued. They were disregarded for years. Now they had a face, a voice, a sign. Aaliyah Brooks was that symbol. She didn't talk to the press, didn't post anything, didn't do any interviews. She let the truth speak for itself. But in the courtroom, she was strong. Be calm. When the prosecution asked her why she recorded, she simply answered, "Because no one believed us until they saw it with their own eyes." The jury was quiet. So did the rest of the world. In a democracy based on freedom and fairness, it can take just one voice or action to remind everyone what justice actually looks like. Not loud. Not violent. No doubt about it. Aaliyah fought the system, and it didn't fall apart. Because she told it, it fell apart. The ocean was calm a year later. Not in a figurative way, but in a real way. The beachfront just south of Cocoa Beach, which used to be dark and full of chemicals and dead zones, was starting to come back to life. Algae came back. Bait fish schools sparkled under the water. For the first time in almost 10 years, people saw sea turtles breeding along the shore. Aaliyah Brooks was standing at the front of a medium-sized research ship, with the wind blowing her curls. Not in uniform anymore. Not hidden anymore. She was now wearing a light blue jacket with the words, Blue Horizon Foundation, sewn on the back. This was a global environmental foundation that had offered her a job as a specialist, not simply a symbol. She wasn't just there to get attention. She was a member of a group, people who study science, people who know about policy, people who fight for change. They all worked hard to fix what greed had almost ruined. And Aaliyah, who had dropped out of college and worked as a waitress, had become the voice of those who were never intended to speak. She had a tough job. Most days began at 5 a.m., taking samples of water, checking out coral nurseries, meeting with people in the area, filing reports that would change environmental policy in the southeastern U.S. But she still moved with the same grace she always did. People really looked her in the eye for the first time. 6 months after the verdict against Gregory Hale, she did one interview. It wasn't for a network. It was on the YouTube channel she made. Her face was serene and direct on the television. No music, no changes, just being honest. "They called me a waitress," she added. "They said I was weak. They told me I was overreacting. But when the truth came out, none of that mattered." She gazed straight into the camera. "I'm not here to be famous. I don't want to get back at you. I'm here because I know what happens when no one listens, and I'm making sure someone does." That one video got 20 million views in less than a week. She finished by promising not to tear down additional giants but to construct something better in their place. And she did what she said she would. In her mother's name, scholarships were set up for students studying marine biology. 3 states passed laws based on her recordings. And the exact university she had left behind invited her back not as a student, but as a guest professor. The audience clapped for a whole minute when she got on stage. Not because she was well known, but only because she had done what few people do. She didn't merely make it through the storm. She changed the course of the tide. And by doing so, she reminded everyone who was watching that redemption isn't a prize. It's your duty. The river never forgets. It has memories in its depths, voices that had been quieted, echoed, Over time, the traces of agony faded. But the sea can show more than just a surface. It shows the truth. And when you see the truth clearly, it can change everything. Aaliyah Brooks didn't want to be a hero. She didn't run after the news. She wasn't aiming to go viral. She simply needed someone to hear her, to care, to witness what she had seen her whole life, wrongs that looked like everyday things. In a world where people like Gregory Hale create kingdoms on quiet, Aaliyah showed that one steady, unshaken voice could break glass barriers more strongly than any storm. Because beneath all the cameras, the courtrooms, and the turmoil, there was a lesson. Not only about racism, or class, or strength, but about being there. The presence of people we don't notice. Truth is there, waiting quietly behind 1,000 tiny acts of cruelty. Courage is there, blossoming in the quiet places where no one can see it. That night, Aaliyah didn't only live. She showed what was underlying. And what was underneath was all of us. Our beliefs. Our involvement. We are quiet. And if you're still watching this narrative right now, if you're still listening, maybe that's the most powerful part. Because it signifies that something inside you changed. You saw what she saw. You felt the same way she did. And now you have to keep that reality alive. So the next time someone is pushed into water, silence, or shame, maybe you'll think of this moment. You might stand up. Or say something. Or just don't look away. That's where justice sometimes begins. Not in court, but in the present. And maybe the next wave of change won't be a movement. It could just be a wave that someone like you began. Someone who decides to care. And if this narrative ignited something in you, if it made you feel anything, take one tiny step right now. Sign up. Not because it assists the algorithm, but we need to hear stories like this one. The ones that make us uncomfortable, excite us, and make us feel more human. And that's what we find here on Hidden Worth. Not simply the news, but voices that were never meant to rise. Thanks for paying attention. We'll see you in the next one.